Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to my Total War Warhammer 2 Everything We Know So Far video. And in today's video, we'll be covering all the information we have about Total War Warhammer 2. You guys may have noticed, if you're not new to my channel, that I put out a video on Friday, but that was kind of my initial reaction to the trailer and the EGX presentation. At that time, I hadn't had a chance to look at the Steam release or the Q&A that Creative Assembly released. So today we're going to take all that information, put it together, look at some of the hints that have been dropped by Creative Assembly in terms of what's coming up in Total War Warhammer 2, and just put it all together and have a bit of a discussion around it. So to kick things off, Total War Warhammer 2 announced on Friday, coming out later 2017. No exact date as of yet, but probably towards the back end of the year. We know that they said they'd be putting on a presentation at E3, which is a big video game summer event. So I think that's July, late July, June, July-ish time. So it at least won't be coming out before then. Now, they made a couple of general announcements about Total War Warhammer 2. Regional occupation is now a thing of the past, but one assumes they will be implementing a system instead to control which territories are most beneficial to which races to take over. I myself put together an idea around this, around population control. If you're interested in that, do check out the video on popping up in the top right-hand corner, my thoughts on regional occupation in Total War Warhammer 2. And let me know if you agree or disagree with my thoughts on that one. So they said that you'll be able to conquer anywhere at this point in Total War Warhammer. And in terms of DLC that you've downloaded for Total War Warhammer 1, that will translate across to multiplayer in Total War Warhammer 2. So you'll be able to play as Beastmen and stuff like that versus all these other new races in Total War Warhammer 2. They also said that all DLC will carry over. Now, the one DLC I have a particular question about is the Blood Pack. Will the Blood Pack carry over? One hopes so, but that's a bit of an iffier one because it's not necessarily a race or a unit or anything like that. It's just the Blood Pack, and they might try and resell it because the reason they divide the Blood Pack in games is to get their ESRB rating down to make that more universal, and then they sell the Blood Pack, which would, if they release that with the game, would raise it up, which suggests they may have to release a separate Blood Pack for Total War Warhammer 2, but I'd be a bit miffed if I had to play for two Blood Packs, if I'm honest. But that's to be seen. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work in terms of the Blood Pack DLC specifically. All the others will be able to transfer across fine, it seems. And yeah, now one of the questions we have here then is, will Creative Assembly and Total War Warhammer 2 go back on their no DLC for DLC rule that Creative Assembly seem to have had for a while? Because there are gaps in some of the races they left behind in the old world, and some of those races might come across, but whether we get extra DLC for that in Total War Warhammer 2, who knows? It's up in the air, no idea about that one yet. That's just something to bear in mind. Now, another thing they announced for Total War Warhammer 2 was the creation of a kind of grand campaign, where the territories of the old world, which is where Total War Warhammer 1 occurred, and I'll pull up a map here just to show you guys. Territories of the old world, where Total War Warhammer 1 occurred, will be combined with the new territories, which are these territories here, as so far have been officially announced in terms of the Southlands, Lustria, Nagaroth, and Ulthuan. And these will all be combined to form one huge map. Now, you might notice there's a glaring gap in this map right here. Now, so one has to assume when they said the Southlands in the material they've released, they didn't specifically say Araby and the Lands of the Dead or Nekakara, because that would give away the Tomb Kings, and they don't want to announce the Tomb Kings yet. A lot of people have stipulated that the Tomb Kings, which are a race who live in this territory in purple, will be the pre-order bonus for Total War Warhammer 2. Now, as far as the other races are, we'll get into that in a bit more detail later on, but we also know that the High Elves, the Dark Elves, the Lizardmen, and most probably the Skaven are the fourth race who will come with Total War Warhammer 2 packaged in. And that's pretty cool. That's great stuff. Great races. Fantastic things. Very excited. I think a lot of people are particularly excited for the Skaven. And so looks like that this gap in the map will probably be filled in to make this kind of territory, the purple and blue, the campaign map for Total War Warhammer 2. Now, this campaign is called, I'm going to maybe refer to it interchangeably as the Total War Warhammer 2 campaign map or the Vortex campaign map. Kind of has a bit of a problem as far as future DLC goes, because as far as size of future DLC goes, we'll touch on the issue of size first. They said in terms of the size of this campaign map, it'll be the same size as the Old World map. Now, you might notice a bit of a disparity there between the size of the territories meant to be covered in the second game and the size of the territory covered in the first game. Now, they've also said that the territory, in terms of settlements, there'll be a third more settlements, so like 33% more settlements than there were in the first game. Now, that seems kind of insane, as from what I understand of the Warhammer world, the Empire and the Old World is one of the most densely populated parts. So one would assume they have more settlements than other parts of the Warhammer world, particularly Araby, which is mostly a desert. So it throws that into consideration a little bit. So one has to assume what they've done is they've shrunken down this element of the world in terms of their new territories, and it won't really play to scale with the Old World until they put it into this grand campaign idea. So it looks like these territories would be shrunken down in comparison to the territories covered in the first game, but I suppose that's maybe understandable to a certain extent, but just something to bear in mind for the campaign map of Total War Warhammer 2. Now, in terms of the DLC, it raises another issue of the map, of the campaign map in Total War Warhammer 2, and how new races might be put into it. Now, Total War Warhammer 1 played on the idea of the races it introduced fit in very nicely with the Old World theme. You had the Wood Elves, who lived in the forest of Athel Loren, located directly in the Old World. You had Bretonnia eventually, added at the beginning, but built on it towards the end for the free LC, which is a territory in the Old World. And you had the Beastmen, who are very famous for being around the Old World. And of course, you had Chaos, who very much occupy the north, have close ties with Norska, come down through Kislev, very famously so. So yeah, very much closely tied to the Old World. Now, if you're looking at races they could introduce in Total War Warhammer 2, your options are a little bit limited. If you're looking at the remaining races, you're looking at the Tomb Kings, which we've kind of covered, and would fit in nicely if they weren't a pre-order DLC. If they just made that a DLC in itself, that would slot in nicely to the map, to the campaign map of Total War Warhammer 2. But the other ones you have would be the Chaos Dwarves, located up here in the brown box there, in the Darklands. And that's not necessarily tightly tied in to the map of Total War Warhammer 2. You wouldn't easily be able to integrate them in there. And you have the Ogre Kingdoms as well, again, even further away from the map of Total War Warhammer 2. So that kind of limits our options. Now, one thing I took great solace in thinking in terms of races they could add as potential future DLC for Total War Warhammer 2 is potentially the Dogs of War. Now, I know a lot of people are excited about the Dogs of War. For those of you who don't know, the Dogs of War are a series of very kind of unique units that make up the mercenary armies of particularly Estalia and Tilia. Excuse me, there I had a little bit of a hiccup. Particularly Estalia and Tilia in the southwestern part of the Old World. Now, you could very much have them coming in on ships and attacking Lustria, attacking Ulthuan, attacking Nagaroth, and that could be a fantastic army book to bring in to Total War Warhammer 2. Now, the other races we're missing, apart from the Chaos Dwarves, the Ogre Kingdoms, the Tomb Kings, and the Dogs of War, are really just Kislev and the Demons of Chaos. And the Demons of Chaos are an army book that's essentially, as far as the leaks and data mining has gone so far, if you're not already aware, are looking like they'll be what makes up the majority of the third game in the Total War Warhammer trilogy. So that just kind of opens up what is that there's not really a lot of races that to add in that fit in nicely with the campaign map of Total War Warhammer 2. So that suggests that maybe DLC might compromise more of kind of legendary lords that they bring in, but their hands are a little bit more tied there in terms of what they can do with the races they introduce. Not on the grand campaign, however. What they could do is just say, right, Total War Warhammer 2 will have the Vortex campaign, or the campaign to start with, act as a kind of mini campaign in its own, and then we'll bring in the Ogre Kingdoms and the Chaos Dwarves and just have them have their own mini campaigns, but then bring that into the grand campaign, but we'll just release it under the title Total War Warhammer 2. That's a way they could do it, but I think they'd really struggle to integrate those two territories in the northeast there into the Total War Warhammer 2 campaign map about the Vortex and stuff like that very easily. I'll get into a little bit more detail about what I mean by the Vortex a little bit later in the video. But just something to bear in mind, my thoughts on some of the difficulties and problems and issues they might have with just like dealing with this campaign map and future potential DLCs and what we can expect to see in terms of races coming out for Total War Warhammer 2. Let me know in the comments if you have any other thoughts on how that might work. But that's the way I see it going. I think Tomb Kings tie in nicely. Dogs of War would tie in very nicely, so fingers crossed for that. Although my one kind of issue about that is Dogs of War was never an 8th edition army book. And for those of you who don't know, 8th edition is the edition of the tabletop game that Creative Assembly have got most of their army inspiration from, and where they tend to be drawing most of their lore and most of their army unit, their army compilations from. So if it's not an 8th edition, it might be, they have brought in stuff that's not in 8th edition, so there is hope, but it just might be a potential speed bump there. But fingers crossed, I'd love to see Dogs of War in Total War Warhammer 2. I think that'd be amazing to see. And maybe even just an expanded Estalia and Tillian faction. I think that would be cool to see as well. So, moving on from my thoughts on the DLC there, and the upcoming DLC, let's move on to some of the armies we have. Also, sorry, just before we actually do move on, another potential race that we haven't seen in Total War Warhammer Tabletop is the Army of Araby. So they could completely make up a kind of Middle Eastern themed army, a sort of medieval Middle Eastern themed army, and make up the Army of Araby. That would be very interesting to see, and I think if Games Workshop let them do it, Creative Assembly would probably have quite a lot of freedom in creating that army. So one to watch out for as well. So potentially Araby, the Dogs of War, Tomb Kings would all tie in nicely. But again, Araby's never really had an official army book as far as I'm aware. So that would be an interesting one to see if they actually do that as well. So moving on, guys. Yeah, this is just the territories of the Chaos things that we would probably make up Total War Warhammer 3. Now, this is the map that they displayed in the data mining, or they didn't display, it was ripped out of data mining from the Russian leak that arrived after Total War Warhammer 1, and it grew, and there were some concerns that this smaller Ulthuan, Nagorov, Lustria, and Araby map might be the grand campaign map, but it seems about what they're talking about and expanding out the game, this seems to be out, so don't worry about this map anymore, guys. It seems from their talk that this map has been revised and that the grand campaign map will be greatly expanded upon what we see here. Fingers crossed. Now, a big disappointment for me personally was there's no naval combat in Total War Warhammer 2. If they were going to introduce it at all in the series, it should have been during this iteration. They may make it a DLC. That's a potential DLC they could make down the line, but that would be a lot of work for a single DLC to introduce naval combat into the whole game. Now, the only way I can find this even remotely acceptable, the excuse they gave was they were focusing on the land battles, is if they fix sieges and if they introduce bridge battles again, okay? If Total War Warhammer 2 has sieges done properly, like they have done in previous Total War titles, then okay, don't include naval battles. If they include bridge battles as well with sieges, okay, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. If they've done neither of those two things and sieges stay the same and there's no bridge battles or no sort of more distinct variety on the battle maps, then you're bullshitting, Creative Assembly, I have to say. I hate to say that, but if you're saying we are focusing on land battles and focusing on them, then yeah, so you're saying that instead of building naval combat, you just did balancing, which isn't a lot of work and really kind of takes away from you calling this the second iteration of the game and speaks more to it being an expansion more than anything else. So hopefully you fix siege battles. That's the only excuse I'll take for you not including naval combat, particularly when the elves and the dark elves, most of their society, let's say a large portion of dark elf society is built around pirating, reaving, raiding, and pillaging on their huge fortress ships. And to take that away takes away a huge element of dark elf society that you could have implemented really well. And the fact that you've done naval combat in the past does irk me slightly. I know some people don't like naval combat, but naval combat in the Warhammer world could have been quite unique, particularly if they based it around the Man of War stuff. If you guys are interested in what some of the naval combat units might have been, do check out the top right-hand corner. There's a link to a whole series I've done on naval combat in the Warhammer world. I was hoping it would come out for this game. Unfortunately, it's not. But hopefully, fingers crossed, that means sieges are fixed or sieges are better. So let's hope for that. That's the only way I'll swallow this bitter, bitter pill. Anyway, a bit miffed about that one, but no naval combat. Now, in terms of the campaign mechanics in Total War Warhammer 2 and that campaign map we discussed previously, the campaign in Total War Warhammer 2 will be based around the Vortex. Now, in the trailer, we saw the armies in Lustria, but at least it doesn't seem to imply they're trying to put the Vortex in Lustria. They realize it's an Ulthuan, and this is kind of when they panned up from the jungle and showed the Vortex across the sea on the island of Ulthuan, which is where the High Elves live. So that's good, and the mechanic seems to be based around this Vortex, based around stabilizing the Vortex, and the idea that the factions are at different odds and have different ideas around what should happen with the Vortex. Some will be looking to destabilize it, some will be looking to stabilize it. One assumes the High Elves and the Lizardmen are looking to stabilize the Vortex, and the Skaven and the Dark Elves are looking to destabilize it just because they want the world to go to shit. So there we go. That's the kind of idea. And apparently an interesting aspect they mentioned about the new campaign will be that even if if you haven't wiped out your enemies by the time the kind of last objectives come up, the enemy can in fact beat you to the final objective. So it looks like at some point it will be a race to either the Vortex itself or in fact a race to maybe some landmarks dotted around the world map or something like that affect the Vortex, and so the enemy can actually beat you there, and if they do, you may risk losing the campaign, which would be fascinating mechanic to see. We're not exactly sure of the ins and outs, but that's what they've hinted at. Now, in terms of the races, we have had Malekith confirmed already. He turned up in that trailer. That's who this lovely masked gentleman is. Malekith is the Witch King, the king of the Dark Elves, and if you'd like a bit more lore on him and his mother, do check the top right hand corner or the description. I've done quite a bit of extensive lore on Malekith. Now, Malekith is the only legendary lord for the Dark Elves we've seen, but in Total War Warhammer 2 they confirmed that every faction will have 2 legendary lords. Now, for the Dark Elves, if they had more than 2, there'd be some debate about who the sort of 3rd or 4th would be, but if it's only 2 for the Dark Elves, the other one would have to be Malekith's mother, Morathi. But we'll get into her in a little bit. But we also had some Dark Elf units confirmed, which are the Witch Elves, pictured here. The Dark Shards, which are crossbowmen for the Dark Elves, but they have an item called the Repeater Crossbow, which fires magazines full of crossbow bolts. So very rapid firing unit, the Dark Shards. It would be very interesting to see how much more quickly they fire than other missile units in Total War Warhammer. And here we have Malekith again, but I wanted to point the picture on the right. This is what a unit called the Bleak Swords, which are essentially the swordsmen of the Dark Elves. They are arrogant tossers by all accounts, but that's them there. Now, I mentioned before that if it is going to be Malekith, the other legendary lord has to be his mother, Morathi. And Morathi really is a pivotal character in the formation of the Dark Elves, so there's no real choice about it. It's going to be her. Like, if they put in anyone else, it just wouldn't make any sense. So the 2 legendary lords, for all my money, I'd bet my house on it, Morathi and Malekith. So looking forward to seeing her in the game. Now, I think we might get other characters later on, such as Helbrun as DLC and stuff like that, but there's stuff to look forward to there in terms of DLC for legendary lords of the Dark Elves. But yeah, for the starting 2, it's going to be Malekith and his mother creeping it up all over Ulthuan and Nagaroth and Lustria. As for the High Elves, we saw in the trailer Teclis, who's the best living High Elf mage, and he also has a twin brother named Tyrion. Now, Tyrion wasn't confirmed in the trailer, but on the Steam page, Tyrion, his brother, pictured here, very much a melee fighter, the best fighter the High Elves have, is named as the faction leader for the High Elves on the Steam page. So Tyrion and Teclis are the 2 legendary lords for the High Elves, confirmed for sure, confirmed by Creative Assembly, 100%. So they're two very cool characters. So looking forward to playing as them, or at least killing them, because you know what, high elves can be a bit annoying. We also have some high elf. I think that's the high elf just spears, unless I'm mistaken. It's just protecting Teclis there. And this is some elves getting shot in the eye. I just included this picture because who doesn't like seeing the arrogant elves getting their comeuppance? Crossbow bolt straight in the eye. Haha, gotcha. And we also had the eagles, I think this is, flying in for the high elves. High elves do have eagles as mounts. I don't think this is the phoenix. The phoenixes would be much more colorful. So I think this is just their eagle riders. It's from the back. It's not the best picture we could grab, but the eagles are confirmed for the high elf army as well. Now, moving on to the Lizardmen, we have Mazdamundi. This is Mazdamundi. I've released a lore video on the likely legendary lords for the Lizardmen. Check that out again, top right-hand corner, popping up just now, or in the description below. Do check it out to know a bit more about Mazdamundi. But Mazdamundi, essentially, one of the, if not the most powerful magic user in the Total War Warhammer world. He does have access to all 8 laws of magic and the high lore of magic, which I can't see Creative Assembly giving them all 8, or at least they'd maybe give him spells from all 8, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing what his upgrade tree looks like. If they wuss out and only give him 1 lore of magic, I think there'll be riots. So the most we've had in Total War Warhammer so far is Manfred with 2. Mazdamundi at least has to have 4. Give him 4 hybrid chains, like just give him some of the most powerful spells from each lore of magic, let him have those, and that will be Mazdamundi. We'll be happy with that. Now, in terms of their generals, in my last video, I didn't mistakenly, I actually pointed out that it might not be him. But I thought this might be Krokgar. It isn't. It's kind of become obvious since then that this is very much just what they call a Saurus Old Blood, which is a kind of generic general for the Lizardmen, but we have them confirmed as a type of general. Now, what I'm going to put forward as an argument is that because we have the Carnosaur, which is the mount here, we have the Saurus mounted on a Carnosaur, that Krokgar is most likely going to be the second legendary lord for the Lizardmen. Now, if you guys don't know who Krokgar is, again, I point you in the video. I point you in direction of my likely legendary lords for the Lizardmen in Total War Warhammer 2 video. But Krokgar essentially is the best kind of Saurus general there is. And he rides one of these dinosaurs, very much like pictured here. But he has some magical items as well. And he looks slightly different than the generic Saurus Old Blood here, which is generic Saurus general. So looking forward to, my money's on Krokgar. I don't know, I just think that's who it's going to be as the other general. Just to have that, what Creative Assembly like doing for their legendary lords is have 1 magic focused, 1 melee focused, and that would fit in very nicely to that idea with Krokgar and Mazdamundi. We also have some skinks here, so skinks confirmed in the game. I think these are skinks with javelins, unless I'm mistaken. Maybe just spears, but I think they might be javelins. And we have Saurus here. Now, I apologize for the blurriness of the picture. It's the best one I could grab. But we have several different variations of Saurus warriors. We have Saurus warriors with hand weapons and shields. We have them with great weapons. Now, I may be mistaken on this, but I'm not sure if in 8th edition the Saurus had great weapons as an option to equip. I think they could equip spears and shields or hand weapons and shields. But I'm not sure if they could equip great weapons, but there's a great weapon variation. I'm not 100% sure on that. That's just off the top of my head. But there is a great weapon variation in this game. The guy here, I'm going to get my mouse out here. The guy here looks like he's have a great weapon. The guy here is shield and hand weapon. Oh. And the guy here is carrying a spear. Now, this isn't a halberd because I think only the Temple Guard, which is a kind of elite unit of Saurus, has the halberd option in the army book of the Lizardmen. So I think that's just a spear with shields of the Saurus warriors. Now, the 4th race, we've had the Dark Elves, we've had the High Elves. 4th race, hinted at very heavily, are the Skaven with the little rat at the end of the trailer. Also, in the trailer, we have the logo, and there are several etchings in the bottom right-hand corner of the Total War Warhammer logo in the trailer. Now, what these etchings are the first one here is of Clan Moors. Now, Clan Moors is a up-and-coming clan in Skaven society. It's not one of the powerhouse 4 clans at the moment, but it's kind of like the next best rival. And now the interesting thing about this is Clan Moors is based in what the Skaven call the City of Pillars, or what you and I might refer to it as Karak 8 Peaks, which, as you may know, is in the Old World. So we're not sure how that ties into the New World, new map. I'm sure they'll just put in a settlement and an army. They're a clan, they're not necessarily a single settlement. So you could argue that some vestiges of Clan Moors went over to the New World and is causing trouble. But the more interesting aspect of Clan Moors is this hints at one of the legendary lords for the Skaven, which is Queek Headtaker. Now, Queek Headtaker is the right-hand man of the leader of Clan Moors, which I'm going to mispronounce this, but I think it's Gnordwell. Now, Gnordwell is the overall leader of Clan Moors, but his right-hand guy, his kind of chief warlord, is Queek Headtaker. And Queek Headtaker is a much-loved Skaven character, so a very likely character for a legendary lord in Total War Warhammer 2. The next one of these etchings I'm going to discuss is this one, which is the Clan Carrion etching. Now, Clan Carrion are interesting in the fact that they're very much scavengers, and they go around sort of picking battlefields clean. They like to paint all their own gear a certain very bright colors, so they're easily identifiable on the battlefield. And there's very much this idea of finders keepers for Clan Carrion. But they would play, if they stick to the lore, like a horde Skaven faction, because they have no permanent settlement. They just kind of wander around the world. They're kind of the vagabonds of the Skaven world. So that's interesting if they're hinting at a horde Skaven faction. So that's quite an interesting little aspect there. The other one here is Clan Rictus. Now, Clan Rictus also hints at a potential legendary lord, but I'm not 100% sure on this. They might just be hinting at the clan itself. But he is Tretch Craventail, who's a character in Skaven for Clan Rictus. Now, Clan Rictus also operate out of the Crookback Mountains. Now, the Crookback Mountains are a mountain that kind of borders the Badlands / World Edge Mountains and the Darklands, which is where we showed you on the map where the Chaos Dwarves live. So this very much hints at a kind of Chaos Dwarf tie-in, the Clan Rictus inclusion there, which is fascinating and very much looking forward to seeing how that plays out. Now, the last one is said to be number 4 here in the Clan of 13, and all of these little etchings have been represented in the Council of 13, which is the ruling council of Skavendom. So as you can see, number 4 there is the last etching. Now, that is said to be the etching of, I've seen it described in 2 ways, as the etching of Lord Paskrit, who is kind of like the High General of the Skaven, as I understand it. Skaven, not my most familiar race in the Warhammer world, but I believe it's been described as the symbol for Skaven Blight I've seen elsewhere. So one of those two, it's either the sort of High General of Skavendom, who may in fact be based out of Skaven Blight, or it's Skaven Blight itself. So a representative for Skaven Blight on the council. So one of those, and so that just hints at Skaven Blight. But again, a lot of stuff tying in to the Old World map rather than necessarily the New World. So it's really interesting that they decided to go for that, these in terms of hints. And the Skaven, I will admit, have a lot more lore tied to the New World, tied to the Old World and the New World. One of the major clans that have a lot of history in the New World is Clan Pestilence. Now, the fact that they're not etched in here would be a bit too obvious. I'm not sure. But that seems like the most obvious inclusion in the Total War Warhammer 2 map, because they have a long history in Lustria. So I have to wait and see for what these little hints mean. They might mean nothing. They might have just been random etchings that artists at Creative Assembly picked out and just put on there as a general hint to Skaven. But it could hint at the 2 legendary lords for Skaven. But I think at least I'm going to take it as a confirmation of Queek, at least, because he's the more popular of the 2, I believe. So Queek Headtaker, probably one of the legendary lords for Skaven in the game. Maybe hinted at here, maybe hinted at Craventail as well. but we'll have to wait and see. And that about sums it up for everything I've managed to garner from Total War Warhammer 2 as it stands at the moment, guys. I went on a bit of a rant there at some points, so I do apologize, but hopefully it was informative. Hopefully you guys learned something, one or two things in this video. And yeah, looking forward to it. So, Skaven, Dark Elves, High Elves, I apologize in advance for this. A lot of people gave me a lot of, well, not grief, but mentioned it in my last video that I very cynically said Skaven were probably going to be a pre-order. And that's just because I figured, you know what, Skaven has a bit more pull than the Tomb Kings as far as pre-order motivation goes. But it's, I'll admit, looking at the Steam page now, it says the fourth race, notorious schemers. That's very much a description of Skaven. So having seen that, Skaven will be the fourth race included in the game, which really puts Tomb Kings to lead up the charge probably on the pre-order motivation. As I said, including them as a pre-order would make sense as it fills in a large portion of the map there that might otherwise be missing if they only included the Southlands in Total War Warhammer 2. But I hope that was clear. Hope you guys enjoyed that. As always, thank you for watching. Special thank you to my patrons, John, Reese, and Thomas. Thank you guys for supporting me. It's really fantastic of you. And I look forward to catching you, all of you guys, on the next one. All right, guys. Thanks again.